Empire.
Welcome to Inside the Cap. I'm your host, Joel Corey. You can find me on Twitter at CoreyJoel, that's CorryJoel, and also my regular CBSSports.com column, Agents Take on NFL Salary Cap and Contract Matters. This time around, we're going to be looking at players who are helping themselves, hurting themselves, and holding steady in a contract year as we are heading into the home stretch of the NFL season, with 4 weeks and 4 games left in the season, as it is now week 15 of an 18-week season. And first up will be players who are helping themselves, and we are going to start off with Geno Smith. Now, when the Seattle Seahawks traded Russell Wilson, and they got quite a nice haul for him. Russell Wilson, the 22 fourth-round pick, were traded to the Broncos for 22 and 23 first-round picks, 22 and 23 second-round picks, a 22 fifth-round pick, and multiple players. Tight end Noah Fant, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, and quarterback Drew Lock. Thought was that this was the worst quarterback group in the league, if not the worst, between Locke and Geno Smith. One of the worst. They need to bring somebody in. Baker Mayfield, trade for him, or Jimmy Garoppolo. Seahawks knew more than conventional wisdom, because they had a quarterback competition between Geno Smith and Locke in training camp to succeed Wilson. Geno Smith won that. He's right now playing on a 1-year deal for $3.5 million, which is worth up to $7 million in incentives. He has changed his career trajectory this year. He's no longer viewed as strictly a quality backup. Geno Smith, heading into Thursday night's game against the 49ers, which Seattle lost 21-13. He was leading the league for 71.5 completion percentage, had the third best passer rating at 106.8, thrown for 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions in 13 games, 3,433 passing yards as well. Was named October's NFC Offensive Player of the Month when Seattle won 4 of 5 games. Seattle has since hit a tailspin and looked like they were going to be heading to the playoffs. Now that's in jeopardy as they're 7-7 after last night's loss. They've lost 4 out of 5. But Smith is having a Pro Bowl caliber season. Seattle reportedly wants him back for 2023, and talks are going to take place after the season. Seattle should be shocked by what I expect Smith's contract demands to be. There should be a little bit of sticker shock, and here's why I say that. If I'm representing Smith, I'm looking north of $30 million per year. And one of the reasons why is, according to NFLPA's data, if you look at the average salary for starting quarterbacks, and that excludes the ones on rookie contracts, that's a whole different system where it's slotted based on your draft position. So just look at the veteran guys. The average salary is $32,036,681 per year. That's average. Geno Smith this year has been above average. So he'd be justified in wanting in excess of that. Now, if I'm Seattle, you typically don't see guys who are 32 have a breakout performance. Is this an outlier for Geno, or is this Geno's just made improvement you typically don't see from the quarterback position? And wouldn't surprise me if Seattle debated putting a tag on him, whether it's the franchise tag or it's the transition tag. And the franchise tag kind of approximates a little higher the average salary I just mentioned. We don't know what 2023 salary cap's going to be, but let's say it's 225. And I say 225 because I've surveyed some teams for what they use for internal projections, and 225 was the most common answer. So I'm using that as a preliminary amount until we get further direction from the NFL on where the cap is going to be. So at 225, that number is going to be $32.445 million. The non-exclusive tag, and Geno I wouldn't stick an exclusive tag on, which would be much higher. It's going to be 14.42% of the cap. That's the cap percentage average, since that's how franchise and transition tags are now expressed. The transition tag, which would only give you matching rights with an offer sheet, would be $29.53 million if we're talking a 225 salary cap. Now, if you stuck a franchise tag on Geno Smith and somebody was willing to give you 2 first-round picks, I'd say, go ahead, got it. We'll take the 2 first-round picks. But Seattle also would be warranted and have some trepidation about Geno. He's kind of hit a little bit of a lull recently as Seattle's gone to a tailspin. But if you look at Case Keenum, that was a guy several years ago with the Vikings, took over and Sam Bradford got hurt. Played great that year, great supporting cast around him. Son of Denver, $36 million over 2 years. It was an outlier / anomaly. Teddy Bridgewater a couple of years ago, when he left being a backup for Drew Brees, signed for $61 million over 3 years with Carolina. Then was traded after 1 year to Denver. Then now is a backup in Miami to Tua Tagovailoa for $6.5 million this year. So I could understand why there'd be some hesitation. Now, the interesting thing is with Geno, people thought that Seattle might be in contention to draft a quarterback early. They are, but not for the reason people initially thought. It might be because Seattle's record is going to be so bad and their own pick would be there. That Denver pick they got in the Russell Wilson trade, the 2023 first-round pick, is currently second if the season ended today, because Russell Wilson is having the worst year of his career in Denver. And instead of being a playoff contender, has a lousy record. So Geno Smith done wonders in his contract year. Now let's look at the running back position. There are a couple of running backs who are worthy of mentioning, and first one is Josh Jacobs. Now, the new regime of GM Dave Ziegler and head coach Josh McDaniels, with their New England pedigree where they really hadn't had a feature back, more running back by committee, passed on a fifth-year option with Josh Jacobs. Would have been a fifth-year option for 2023 at $8.034 million. Now, all Josh Jacobs has done is made them regret on declining the option. He's a candidate for NFL Offensive Player of the Year. He's leading the NFL with 1,402 rushing yards. Leads the NFL in yards from scrimmage. That's combined rushing and receiving yards. He's got 1,748 yards from scrimmage. He's got 11 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for third in the NFL. Now, as a running back, you aren't in the position to cash in on a career year like you would at a lot of other positions if you hit the open market. With the type of year Jacobs is having, at any other position you might be able to reset the market or get very close to that. There's not a legitimate chance for that to happen for Jacobs at running back. Chris McCaffrey is the highest paid running back in the league. In 2020, after his third year, he signed a 4-year extension averaging a little over $16 million per year with $39,162,500 guarantees and $30,062,500 was fully guaranteed at signing. That deal is still going to hold up. There are 8 running backs in the NFL with contracts averaging $12 million per year or more. All these deals are for players to remain on their own team. Then there's a gap in how the running back market works. After those 8, you have a downward turn to $7 million. Last year, James Conner and Leonard Fournette signed deals averaging $7 million per year, and they also stayed put. Wouldn't be surprising to me if Jacobs got franchise tag, and that number for running backs is going to be $10.1 million for $225 million salary cap. It's going to take up 4.489% of the cap. That's what the running back number's going to take. There's some misinformation out there. There's no way the running back franchise tag is going to jump from $9.57 million, what it is in 2022, the current year, to over $12 million. Ain't going to happen. You are not going to see at a position this year an over 25% increase in the running back tag. And personally, with running backs, if I could tag them, because that number's reasonable, I'd tag them until it didn't make sense and then try to draft a replacement. That's just me. Obviously, some teams like Tennessee Titans, that is the identity of their team, the running back Derrick Henry. But a little over $2 million difference between the tag and the declined fifth-year option. Jacobs going from getting that decline to what he's doing this year, hell of a contract year. Now, another running back, Saquon Barkley. It's kind of a crossroads heading into this year. The great rookie year. It was Offensive Rookie of the Year. Led the NFL in 2018 with 2,028 yards from scrimmage. Second year wasn't quite as good, but still had over 1,000 yards. Tore his ACL in 2020, only played 2 games. 2021, 593 rushing yards, 3.7 yards per carry in 13 games. So, he's playing this year on a $7.217 million fifth-year option. So he really needed to have a good year to put himself in a position to make more than what his rookie contract averaged when you factor in the option year, which is $7,682,350. He's done that. The Giants had negotiations with Barkley prior to the Week 9 bye. Reportedly, two sides weren't close. Got to imagine he's trying to reset the market. It's not going to happen for Jacobs, and not going to happen for Barkley. Barkley this year, 1,083 rushing yards, which is 4th in NFL. 1,344 yards from scrimmage, 6th most in the NFL. Could he get paid as one of the 5 highest paid running backs in the league by the Giants? Yeah, that's possible. In order to be in the top 5, you'd have to go above Derrick Henry. And Henry is a franchise player in 2020, signed a 4-year deal averaging $12.5 million per year. There's $25.5 that's fully guaranteed at signing, and incentives made that deal worth as much as $51 million. So maybe you get there. David Johnson several years ago, going to his contract year. He only had one really good year. I think it was his second year when he led the NFL in yards from scrimmage, signed for $40 million over 3 years, 13.3 a year. Maybe that's where it maxes out for Barkley, or he's also a franchise tag candidate as well. James Bradberry is someone who is making the most of the Giants not being able to afford him. Bradberry was cut after the draft, and he was on a deal averaging $14.5 million per year. Ends up going to Philly, signs a 1-year deal for base value of $7.25 million. For incentives, the deal maxes out at $10 million. He's been phenomenal this year and has given Philadelphia arguably the best cornerback tandem, where he's opposite Darius Slay. We'll see if both those guys get to the Pro Bowl when the announcements are made next week. But he's been targeted 74 times. And quarterbacks are completing 44.6% of passes against him. He's given up 1 TD, has 3 interceptions, so that's 33 receptions given up. And passer rating when targeting him is 43.6%, which is phenomenal. He's also second in the NFL with 14 passes defensed. Getting back to that old deal should be a possibility. He's going to be 30 next season. So I might try to get back to my old deal, 14.5, maybe a little higher at 15. But if you're looking at older corners, you had Stephon Gilmore, who's a couple of seasons removed and a little older. I think he's 32 from his NFL Defensive Player of the Year season. Signed with the Colts for $20 million over 2 years, maxing out at 23. And we had last year come off a rookie contract. Charvarius Ward left Kansas City to go to the Niners on a deal averaging $13.5 million per year. Maxes out at $42 million, and it's just $26.2 million in guarantees. So Bradford's done what he's needed to do to stay in the same salary stratosphere he was on the 3-year deal he signed with the Giants in 2020. Daron Payne picked the absolute perfect time to show a dimension of his game that he hadn't before. His calling card had been stopping the run till this season. Now, this year, playing under an 8.529 fifth-year option, and the Commanders didn't show any interest or much interest in extending his contract, and during OTAs, he was boycotted a few of those. He's got 8.5 sacks, which is a career high. And 15 tackles for loss, which tied for second most in the league. He's playing a position which is primed to see salaries increase. There'd been a cap on the interior defensive lineman market. Aaron Donald, the deal he signed in 2018, averaged $22 million per year. He underpaid because he's been the best non-quarterback in football for quite a while now. In the offseason, the Rams did something you typically don't do. He had 3 years left on his contract. They just ripped it up. Didn't want any new years. Just gave him a new $95 million deal for the 3 years. So that averages $31,666,607 per year. Now, his previous $22 million ceiling means there's a big gap between Donald and who's next. Next in line in the interior defensive lineman salary hierarchy are DeForest Buckner and Leonard Williams at $21 million per year. Donald's deal averages almost 51% more. So that gap's going to be closed. And Payne may be one of those guys who benefits from that. And going into this season, it was hard to imagine that he was going to get a contract which would exceed Jonathan Allen, his line mate on the interior. And Allen last year signed a 4-year, $72 million extension, averaging $18 million per year. The Commanders have to be rethinking letting him walk. He's probably going to get consideration for a franchise tag, and the interior defensive line, the defensive tackle franchise tag projects to $18.954 million at a $225 million salary cap, and that's going to be 8.424% of the cap. So to retain him long term, Commanders probably have to exceed Allen, which never probably entered into their equation. or sticking a tag on him, which probably didn't enter into their equation. They spent all those first-round picks on the defensive line. I thought that something was going to have to give, and it'd be Payne. We'll see, because Chase Young, who's still trying to get back and get right from the ACL, he tore in the middle of last season, and Montez Sweat, I thought the ends would be there long-term, but we'll see how many of these guys they can keep together. But right time to show a new dimension of your game. Evan Ingram is quietly having a very good year. Maybe not so quiet after last week, because Ingram, when the Jaguars handled the Titans quite easily, had a career game. 11 catches, 162 yards, 2 touchdowns. Best game of Evan Ingram's career. Now, last year Ingram was a disappointment on a fifth-year option with the Giants. And I thought that he's going to have to take a one-year prove-it deal for probably no more than $5 or $6 million. Was I wrong on that one? Jaguars snatched him up. One-year deal for $9 million, which maxes out at $10 through incentives. Now, Ingram is statistically potentially going to have the best year of his career. Right now, he's fourth among tight ends with 53 receptions, fifth in receiving yards heading into Week 15 before last night's game was played with 548 yards. That's 4 touchdowns. Now, I don't think he gets out of Jacksonville. They could put a tag on him. His situation is, I think the 120% calculation is going to may factor into his. Because the way it would work, instead of the cap percentage average, he's got $9 million as a base, and 120% of that is going to put him 10-8, and then you add back in the incentives, depending on how many he earns, they would all be in, whether it be likely or not. That could put him over what the number is going to be by the formula, the cap percentage average number for tight ends, which will be $11.355 million, which would be 5.047% of the cap. In terms of getting value relative to where the top of the market is, it makes sense to tag at least the first time a tight end, because all those deals are north of $13 million per year when the tag is going to be at 11.3 this year. So if I'm Ingram, I'm thinking Dawson Knox is my floor, and Knox signed a $50 million extension with the Bills during preseason, averaging $13 million per year, maxes out at $53.6, and there's $31.2 million in guarantees. Did not see Evan Ingram being a tight end that potentially could be making this type of money when the season started. So Evan Ingram's definitely made himself some money this year. Staying in the realm of people who catch passes, Juju Smith-Schuster, someone that free agency hasn't been kind to past couple of years. In 2021, Juju couldn't find any takers for his asking price, which was in the $13 to $15 million range, reportedly. So he goes back to Pittsburgh on a one-year deal for $8 million. Played 5 regular season games before he had a left shoulder injury, which kept him out for the entire regular season. Those 5 games, 15 receptions, 129 yards, and no touchdowns. Returned for a wild card playoff game against the Chiefs, had 5 catches for 26 yards. Then this year, signs with the Chiefs, and it's a one-year contract for base value of $3.25 million originally, worth up to $10.75 million through incentives. Then over the summer, they added $510,000 to his roster bonus, which bumped up the base value. That's a per game roster bonus where he had to be active. He already had 510 per game roster bonuses. They doubled it, so it's 1.02 million, $60,000 for each game active. So his base value is 3.76. Now, Juju's made the most of the opportunity that's presented itself because Tyreek Hill got traded to the Dolphins. And he's having a season where he's flirting with 1,000 yards. If he hadn't had the concussion issue, he'd be well over that pace. But 12 games, 61 catches, 762 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had a 3-game stretch before he had the concussion where he had 22 catches, 325 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, one thing about Juju, he's been more or less a slot receiver his whole career. This year, if the Chiefs spending the lowest percentage of time in the slot on passing plays, he's only in the slot 41% of the time. Last year, for Pittsburgh, he was in the slot 77% of the time. In 2020, he was in the slot 84.7% of the time. Kansas, and the receiver market isn't going to be great. All the guys who would have made it a great receiver market re-upped with their own team. The draft receivers aren't supposed to be on par with what they've been the past 2 years either. So that could benefit Juju in terms of if you want a receiver, he's going to be near the top of the market. Now, Odell Beckham Jr., if he doesn't sign for the postseason or signs a one-year deal instead of the multi-year deal he's seeking, be great for him too. If I'm Juju, I'm looking at Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk never had a 1,000-yard year in Arizona. Goes to Jacksonville for $18 million per year on a 4-year deal. $37 million fully guaranteed at signing. Deal can max out at $21 million per year, $84 million total with incentives, which Kirk's going to earn some of them. That's what I target. I don't know if I'm going to find any takers, but I would also be looking at what Allen Robinson got from the Rams. It's turned out to be a terrible deal for them. Robinson had his worst healthy season last year in Chicago, then goes to the Rams on a 3-year, $46.5 million contract, averages $15.5 million per year, worth up to $48 million through incentives with $30.75 million fully guaranteed. Now, if I'm staying in Kansas City, I'm bringing up an old deal. If the negotiations stay put, I'm like, hey, you guys paid Sammy Watkins $16 million per year when you had Tyreek Hill on the other side, like 4 years ago, or 5 years ago. I should be worth $16 million today. I know different types of receivers. Sammy Watkins, first-round pedigree, speed receiver who could never stay healthy. But that would factor into my negotiations with the Chiefs if I'm Juju to come back. And under no circumstance would I be going back to the Chiefs for less than what you're paying Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who I'm outperforming. And Scantling signed a 3-year, $30 million contract, $15 million in guarantees. Max is at $36 million. So I'm looking at the max value is my floor, particularly with Kansas City. And one more guy I want to mention is Caleb McGarry. Atlanta turned down the 5th-year option for the right tackle. It was the $13.202 million 5th-year option. He's always been a better run blocker than pass blocker. Great against the run this year, and improved in the pass as well. He's only given up 13 quarterback pressures this year. That's combined quarterback sacks, hits, and hurries. Last year in 16 games, it was 41. In 2020, 30 quarterback pressures in 14 games. As a rookie, 49 quarterback pressures in 16 games. So I got to think that he's kind of put himself in a position to sign a long-term deal for more than that fifth-year option as a right tackle. So McGary, the improvement in pass blocking, which still lags behind his run blocking, is going to make him a lot of money this year. Well, that's going to be this week's Inside the Cap. Don't forget, you can find me on Twitter at Corey Joel. That's CORRYJOEL. And also check out my CBSSports.com column, Agents Take NFL Salary Cap and Contract Matters. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next time.